kind of your typical slide here. I know Nancy already went over this, so I'm not going to go over it too much. Lead enterprise strategy and innovation at Service Credit Union. Former head of strategy at a financial services business firm of foreign exchange, as well as do a lot of work at Innovate Calgary, McEwen University, and Arby. And there's just a list of clients I've worked with over the years. Now, let's start at the beginning here. So look what's happened in the past 5 years. COVID, global tariffs, launch of OpenAI, the Russian-Ukraine war, North American wildfires. It's been to use a term, it's been a pretty crazy world. There's been a lot going on, lots of change, especially in Alberta. We've seen a lot of different industries really starting to get up and thrive. We've seen ag tech, we've seen carbon capture, clean tech, we've seen the startup ecosystem just go absolutely bonkers. Lots of great tech companies being built, and really the urban centers, a la Calgary and Edmonton, they're really starting to focus on developing and the universities rather are really starting to focus on reskilling the workforce. And then you also have a lot of new industry. You're seeing a lot of that. You've seen that over the past 5 to 10 years, but you're going to see definitely a lot more of it, especially with our new government, our federal government, and the aerospace and the defense industry. So lots going on. Okay. Now, what I want to talk about today is I want to put my futurist hat on and I want to talk about like, what does the future look like for Alberta? It's important for us as leaders to really have that crystal ball. We need to look ahead to the future because we do need to make a prediction about what the future is going to look like because municipalities, business leaders, entrepreneurs, we all need to make investments now to ultimately prepare for the future. Okay, so that's what I'm going to talk about in the next couple of slides here. Before I get into it, I want to give a little bit of a brief history though on Alberta. Okay, so bold visions have really led to outsized results. I have a quote from George Étienne Cartier, 1873, railways mean influence, progress, unity, and wealth. We've really seen that transform Alberta. We've seen the modern locomotive really transform Alberta, whereas 100 years ago, Alberta was nowhere near what it is today, of course. You've seen significant development in northern Alberta, southern Alberta, all quite frankly due to the railway. That was really the single most impactful technology, I'll say, of the last 150 years. Okay. It's led to prosperity. The first carload of crude oil that was shipped in 1952. The first transcontinental scheduled passenger train in Alberta, that was again in the early 1900s as well. Okay. What has that led to? Well, it took some leadership. It took a bold vision. And what's happened? Well, we've seen Calgary, we've seen Banff, we've seen Southern Alberta thrive. We've seen the oil industry and the energy industry in Fort McMurray. We've seen just an image here of the Peace River gas refinery. Lots of people living in Alberta these days. 5 million people living in Alberta. We're thriving. A lot of that is due to the start, which was the railway. That led to the oil and gas industry, and then that turned Alberta to what it is today. Okay. Now, that's important because I want to really anchor on the point that it takes bold vision to really deliver and achieve anything. It takes very good leadership and vision to really achieve anything. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the next, later on in the presentation, actually. Okay. Now, let's talk about the rural communities. Young people are leaving rural communities. So they're seeking economic opportunity in the larger cities. I know myself, I work in the credit union, the banking industry. There's been a ton of interprovincial migration from BC and Ontario. There's also been a ton of migration from rural communities into places like Calgary, Edmonton, Lethbridge, Red Deer, etc. What are the young folks in search of? Well, they're searching for economic opportunity. So I have a chart on the bottom that really articulates this. Can everybody hear me? Just want to make sure everybody can hear me here.
I think so.
Okay, sorry, it froze up on my end, but that's okay.
We're getting lots of thumbs up, so I think you're
Okay,
okay.
awesome. Okay, sorry about that.
It's all
Okay,
good.
sorry about that. I'm just gonna reshare my computer there. It froze up on my end for some reason. Okay, back to what I was talking about. So we've seen 700K Albertans move to urban Alberta, and we've seen 70K Albertans move to rural communities. Okay, obviously a huge difference, 700K compared to 70K. It's a 10x difference. So young people are leaving rural communities. They're seeking economic opportunity. Another stat, 67% of rural Albertans do not have access to reliable high-speed internet. That's part of the reason why the Alberta broadband strategy has been developed and starting to get implemented. We're seeing infrastructure gaps in rural communities. Okay, so much population. We're seeing some gaps in broadband, healthcare, and transportation. There is certainly some dependence on the energy industry. Okay, there's aging population that needs senior centers and healthcare. All of these trends, to me, they basically mean we need a future economy with people that provides economic opportunity, provides the skills that people need, provides the jobs, and in my view, what's really important would be entrepreneurs at scale. Okay, so that those are kind of the challenges right now in rural communities. Okay, what are some of the growth opportunities? Well, we still have, and we'll always have really for a long time, abundant energy and resources, low corporate tax rate, and then now we're starting to see some really specialized and developed economies starting to build. So we're seeing the aerospace industry, we're seeing defense manufacturing, we're seeing carbon capture, we're seeing agri business or agri food. The list goes on and on. The rural communities, we're really starting to see a lot of those specialized industries, and quite frankly, it's really great to see. In addition to that, we have this really amazing culture within the rural communities, very entrepreneurial, which I certainly absolutely love. And then we have an aging population as well that will likely in the future, there's an opportunity to build more seniors homes, will build senior centers that could create a construction boom. Okay. So there's a significant amount of growth opportunities in rural Alberta. Yes, there's some challenges, as I've indicated, but there's tons of growth available. So ultimately, I'll end with the thesis here that rural Alberta has supply side strengths. So we have everything we need in rural Alberta, but we need things like broadband and we need the opportunity to be more competitive, especially given this changing world that I'll talk about in a bit. Okay. So ultimately, my message to leaders, to policymakers, to entrepreneurs, to municipalities is let's work on fixing the challenges and let's double down on our strengths or double down on our growth opportunities. Okay. All right, moving on. Now there's a big macro trend that everybody has probably been hearing about, and that is the famous AI word. You can't go anywhere these days without somebody talking about it. So what is AI? Really, really interesting trend. I want to show you a couple of trends right now going on in the US. Okay. So the chart on the left, you'll notice there that when it comes to data center construction versus office construction, you can see how office construction has completely fallen off a cliff, decreasing at an increasing rate. Data center construction, since ChatGPT launched in 2021, you're starting to see data centers crop up everywhere. Okay. Now that's a very interesting trend, and that you can definitely use that as a trend to predict the future. I'll tell you some other really amazing stat right now going on in the US. US data center energy consumption right now is about 3.9% of the total energy expenditure in all of America. So it's about 4%. By 2030, due to all the data center construction, it's expected to grow to not to go from 3.9% to 8.1%. Okay, that's absolutely massive. Um, and you can look at the bar chart just to see how exponential that growth is. So the bottom line is there's going to be a lot more data centers right in the US, and there's going to be a lot more electricity demand as a result. So what does the world ultimately need? The world ultimately needs vast and cheap energy in this new economy. Okay. Now, here are some other really amazing statistics. Okay, I'll talk about the one on the right. AI, from a capital expenditure perspective, is massively increasing. You can see the chart where there's barely any investment starting in 2015. And now, let's say starting in 2022, you can really start to see it being ramped up. Forecasts are that the Mag 7 or big tech like Facebook, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, they've like quadrupled their budgets in AI. They're building data centers. They're building capability to lead in AI because ultimately, right now, there's an arms race. This represents certainly some opportunities for Alberta. Given our abundant natural gas and carbon capture capacity, this makes us a very competitive Canadian hub in the future, potentially for AI. Now, that also does lead to some risk potentially too. I'm not saying we need to do this tomorrow, but there is an opportunity due to the abundance in natural gas. Okay. You can see the chart on the left that covers ChatGPT, and you can see how comparing to really the largest social media networks ever, you can see how big of a dent ChatGPT has made. Okay. Instagram, it took 96 months to get to a billion active users. It's basically taken half the time it took Instagram, half the time for ChatGPT to reach a billion users. So that should be a signal going on in your mind is, okay, you know what? This AI, this AI thing is real. This AI thing is quite frankly going exponential, and this is something that we need to pay attention to. Okay. Now, let's take these big macro trends because I'm talking about the US. Let's look at these from also a Canadian perspective and more importantly, a rural community perspective. To me, what this might lead to is the next phase in Alberta's economic transformation is ultimately to build what I call the digital railway. So I purposely put a slide at the beginning of the presentation because I wanted to show that the railway was ultimately that huge economic transformer. It was that driver. The new world that we're living in, given the signals that I'm seeing, given the industry analysis that I'm looking at, the signals are saying invest in AI. And communities in Canada should certainly be doing that. We should be preparing for it now. And really, what the opportunity to me is, it's not to pivot away from what we do already because we're great. We do some great work in agribusiness, energy. There's a lot of different sectors we're quite good at and talented at as a province and in regional rural communities. However, what the real opportunity now is to add tech to everything we do. So energy, there's a huge opportunity to add tech to energy. Agritech is something that's certainly going to be something that we should be investing in. Logistics, aerospace, every single industry has the potential now to digitally transform. So when you think about the size of the opportunity, you need to think about it like this. Like we have all these traditional industries that are all going to be digitally transformed. Now, adding on to that, you have all these various new industries, clean tech, data centers, ag tech, defense industry, drone industry, the UAV industry. These are all industries that weren't really that big, let's say 3, 4 years ago, and they're starting to become really important, especially as Canada ramps up a lot of its spending, and in particular, they're ramping up a lot of their defense spending. So I guess what I want you to take away from this slide here would be digital transformation of our current industries is a good thing because it makes us more efficient and productive. And then also the way the world is going, that's leading to these new white spaces, these new industries that certainly are going to diversify our economy, provide more tax revenue, and ultimately, the most important part, in my view, provide more jobs. Okay. Now, there's a really ambitious data center strategy. $100 billion data center strategy. Okay. Certainly very ambitious. Now, I want to present a balanced view. I don't necessarily want to paint a picture that tomorrow we should be investing billions upon billions of dollars in AI and data centers. It's not necessarily practical or pragmatic. Do I think we should be preparing for this future? Absolutely. Um, is this something that we should be methodical and thoughtful about and perhaps pilot test? I do think so. I do believe that the trends and the way the world is going, there is a significant opportunity in this space. And given Alberta and its abundance of energy, I do believe that certainly if we pay attention to it and if we invest smartly and invest right, we can take advantage of this in a pretty material way. Okay. Now, I want to show you some examples of success, and I wanted to show them in two different ways. I wanted to show you a kind of a macro view and what can happen from a micro view. Okay. So the best example I can think of is in Loudoun County in Virginia, US. Okay. That really shows what's possible with a 20-year investment in AI and data centers. This niche part of the US actually hosts 70% of the world's internet traffic, which is amazing when you think about it. All it started at was data centers. So just data centers cropped up, continued to build, continued to build. Now it's a huge cluster of different industries like cloud providers, cybersecurity firms, startups. 20-year vision, that was 20 years ago. Okay. It's been a pretty material driver for the area of Virginia, and it's resulted in a pretty significant amount of jobs, 74,000 jobs, 5 billion in labor income, and 10 billion in GDP annually. And these are American USD, by the way. Okay. What's interesting enough about this area as well is it's created it's the happiest U.S. county in the U.S., which is pretty interesting. I'm certain some of it has to do with the economy, quite frankly. Economy is really great and stable, but again, this is a 20-year vision where one step was taken and then boom, it led to really something great at a macro scale. Okay, let's talk about micro. So micro, a good example of micro scale, and when I say micro, I mean like very small scale that led to good results, was in Quincy, Washington. Okay, so Quincy, Washington attracted Microsoft, Yahoo, and later Amazon, and they were attracted by the cheap hydropower. Okay. Now, what is a contribution from an annual perspective USD? As there's been time to build this out, $1 billion. Okay, well it's a good amount, certainly. Not a huge amount though. What I actually think is more important is it's led to a lot of improved development and infrastructure. So for example, in Quincy, Washington, it's led to a Quincy Medical Center that was desperately needed in the area, and it's now offering vital healthcare services. So I would just say as a general principle, don't necessarily have to go macro with data centers, but if you go micro, it is proving to have some sort of benefit, and it could improve your infrastructure. It could improve areas that you're lacking, like healthcare, for example. And then one of the areas for municipal leaders to think about would be property tax revenue. So you put a data center on a location, and now, for example, in Quincy, it represents 75% of property tax revenue, which is pretty material. It also locally upskills people into tech roles, and it prevents a rural brain drain because it creates community, it creates a regional hub, it actually creates startups and tech businesses. Okay? So that's what I really like about it. Now, it was an original farming town, so you can see here on the image on the left, definitely very rural. Now it's home to data centers and a growing ag tech sector that leverages cloud and data. Okay, so that's a good image of, I wanted to show macro, which was Loudoun County in Virginia, the US, and I wanted to show Quincy, Washington, US. Okay, now what do I believe is the opportunity here? I believe that blending technology and trades is how we need to think about rural communities. Okay, I'm not sure who has heard this or what, but I'll say that there's a massive shortage of trades in not just Canada, but Alberta. I'm talking massive at scale. the numbers are pretty significant. So I believe that given the changing economy, given AI, given the way the world's going with technology, you're going to need to blend those together. So I'll give you some examples and something to think about. So when it comes to AI and data centers, setting those up, you actually require the same type of jobs that you require in the natural gas industry. HVAC type folks, for example, electricians. Those are two professions that wouldn't necessarily go away if you build data centers. Okay. Now, given what I was talking about with how industry is digitally transforming, you're going to now need a blend of people. You're going to need people with trades backgrounds and technology, blending them together, because ultimately that's the opportunity. You can also see in the chart here how on the far right now, AI is really impacting sales, marketing, software engineering, basically any sort of coding and programming. AI is really impacting that in a very material way. That's actually leading to a lot of layoffs in Canada and the US because folks that are programmers are, some of them in some cases are replaced by AI. So our industry, which is great about Alberta, isn't necessarily code driven. We're requiring folks who are going to need to work in robotics. They're going to have to work with hardware. They're going to have to work in energy plants. They're going to have to work in agriculture, manual labor type, or I shouldn't say manual, but labor intensive industries. So when you blend technology and trades together, that really to me is the opportunity in the future. And that's what I believe where rural communities should really start to pay attention to and to upskill. Okay. Now, ultimately, I've talked a lot about, I'll just go back a bit. I've talked a lot about the economic transformation, and ultimately, the opportunity here is to build a digital railway. I've talked about ambition, $100 billion data center strategy, very ambitious. I've talked about what can be possible at a macro level. I've talked about what can be possible at a micro level. That what I mean by that is at your community level. And then I've talked about, okay, what's the opportunity? Let's blend technology and trades together. What are the whole benefits of doing this? Well, stronger tax base in rural Alberta. So you'll have more balanced revenues, less volatile, perhaps less dependent on resources. So that doesn't mean you pivot away from the energy industry because the energy industry will continue to be strong. What it means is your folks in rural communities stay and they might work in ag tech, or they might work in cloud, or they might work in cybersecurity, or they might work in drone tech, defense tech, etc. They'll be working in diversified fields, therefore balancing the tax revenues. It'll also, in my view, becoming a very technology-centric economy will result in higher quality jobs, particularly in trades. Okay, so there's a huge shortage of trades, and we know that already. That's documented everywhere. There's a huge, a massive amount of homes that need to be built in our country and in Alberta. And with this type of economy, a tech-driven economy that still has energy, that still is very traditional, but is moving to the future, that will result in higher wage and diversified opportunities. Okay. And it also leverages our industry roles in the natural gas industry because the same skill set that is required right now in natural gas industry is required for the world that I'm talking about in this tech-centric economy. Okay. Third, billions of new capital investment ultimately spurs energy demand. Okay. When you build out all these data centers, that spurs more energy demand, and that means more energy will be needed. Okay, so that continues to support our traditional energy industry. And then last but not least, like I showed you the example already of the micro community in Quincy, Washington. There's an opportunity for communities to be more resilient as the property tax revenues can fund things like schools, healthcare, infrastructure, which ultimately strengthens rural communities. Now, I did some modeling on what that could look like, and I'll spare the details for now on that one. What I will say is I basically just modeled out like what could be possible and modeled out that you'd get basically more diversified in terms of your tax base for a lot of different rural communities. Okay, so what's the call to action here? So I've talked about this new world, this new economy. First thing I would say would be it's important to what I call build the digital railway or build digital infrastructure. Okay. So just as the railways unlocked Alberta's economy in the 1900s, fiber, cloud, and data centers are the backbone of this new economy. Just want to make sure for some reason my screen froze up again, but everyone can hear me.
I think so. We're getting lots of thumbs up.
Okay, good. Okay, sorry about that, folks. Okay, can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so build the digital infrastructure the same way we built the railways. Okay, and now again, I don't want you folks to think like this is something that we just do tomorrow. Again, we need to be very thoughtful and methodical about it. But I do want to articulate that it is an opportunity. How can that happen? Well, you can create transparent regulatory pathways, which has actually already been done by the Alberta government. You need to build more broadband. Okay. You need to make land rezoning to make it easier to actually de-risk investors to invest in this type of industry. I think most importantly, I think you need to start educating rural communities about what this could look like. Now we've seen, I think it was Rocky View County, that there were certainly some challenges articulated by Rocky View County. And these are exactly the type of conversations we need to have. We need to, if we decide and if there's a decision made to really focus on this type of investment, rural communities need to be engaged in a very serious way. Just like when the oil and gas industry was starting, there was pushback, but then you could ultimately see the benefits through investment, through education. That same thing needs to happen. And in fact, I can draw a lot of parallels to the energy industry and how oil and gas has been built up over time. Next, start intersecting AI, robotics, technology into every single course, every training program, every company. So companies are responsible for their training programs, how they're developing their people needs to be AI, robotics, and technology generated. Every training program in university, there's lots of micro credentials. Those need to include AI, robotics, and technology. Because what you're going to see is you're going to see these traditional trades. You're going to see those inject technology more into them, i.e., HVAC, controls, piping, electrical, etc. Then you're going to see this new world of emerging skills, robotics, AI, data science, technology, machine learning, AI engineers. You're going to see those kind of converge over time as this new economy builds up and builds up. So yeah, ultimately the opportunity here for universities is to invest in AI, robotics, and technology, which is exactly what they're doing right now, which is great. Okay. What else? Well, I call it scaling smart. So you want to scale smart, you want to close any gaps, and you want to reskill your workers. Because ultimately, I do believe that this could be pretty significant and it could create a boom situation. Um, but you want to do it in the right way. So you want to prove out viability with pilot type projects to really build it out. Because right now you can't go for the big bang, let's say, and nor should you. You need to be methodical about it. In addition to that, you need to close the infrastructure gaps. Okay, so there's significant gaps there with fiber, and natural gas, etc., that we just need to build that and make that better to enable more growth. But I think ultimately the biggest opportunity that I want to articulate here is that you need to seize the trades opportunity. There already is a shortage, and there's going to be a trade shortage now in the future. And that might be the biggest opportunity for Alberta, quite literally in decades. I do truly believe this could result in a significant economic boom for Alberta. And then last but not least, turn AI research strength, which is what we have right now, into true commercialization. Edmonton has amazing talent in AI. I'm talking top in the world. Okay. But what we're not good at is we're not good at turning that research strength into commercialization. Some of that is cultural. Some of that is Albertans, although they're very entrepreneurial, it's hard to commercialize these type of industries like AI. Some of it is risk aversion. Some of it is quite literally we're losing our best people. They develop research and then they go to the US to commercialize it. So we need to actually commercialize a lot of our AI in-house here in Alberta to really make a difference. Okay. And I'll spare you the details on going through all of all of the recommendations here, I'll say. But one thing I'll just say is each stakeholder, so we have all the various stakeholders like the federal government, the GOA, universities, economic development organizations, indigenous banks, etc., credit unions. All of those stakeholders have a part to play in this, and all of these stakeholders can work together, can collaborate, and they have a part to play ultimately in making this new technology economy happen. Okay, now I'll end things off with the following statement. Every boom in Alberta's history began with some bold bets. Are you ready to place the next one? It's really the onus on entrepreneurs, policymakers, economic developers, governments, citizens, etc. I do believe that this new tech economy, not just AI and data center, but this new tech economy can really strengthen the resilience of Alberta. And I do believe that if we make a bold bet and we consider more investment and we start to really try to make a difference in this space, I do believe that amazing things can happen. Okay. Now, I'll just end off with the following. So I'll say my friends at McCune University, they've been fabulous to me, and they've kept me employed as an instructor for many years now, a little over 6 years. So you should certainly consider them. Shameless plug. I'll just say consider them when it comes to some AI and innovation training. In addition to that, if you need any help, I'd love to grab a coffee and chat. I'd love to chat about if your municipality is digital ready. Do you need help explaining to residents the complexity of how the world is changing? Do you want to keep youth and trades in rural communities in the region? Do you need help in developing workforce strategy? I'd love to help you. So yeah, like I said, I'm Colin Knoll, and I help business leaders, I help policymakers, entrepreneurs, businesses, organizations ultimately turn what are these really big economic shifts and ideas, and I turn those into practical strategies, and I help execute on those too. Okay, so that wraps up the presentation.
Thank you, Colin.
Would love to hear from folks.
Does anybody have any questions? I'm not seeing any in the chat at the moment, which is okay because it means, Colin, that your presentation was very comprehensive.
Awesome. Okay.
Anybody have any questions? Oh, I'm not seeing any right now. Well, I'm not seeing any questions. Don't forget that you will be, oh, here we go. Here's a question. Are there any school districts implementing tech well now?
Oh man, I don't want to single out a certain one doing better than the other. I would just say I would say I'm happy and I'm proud to see a lot of universities going into this space. In fact, they've been doing it over the last couple of years. Sometimes you'll see industry move way faster than sometimes you'll see industry move way faster than universities, and universities investing in this type of training might take a bit of time and it lags. But what I've been happy to see is that universities are certainly investing in this space and they're committing to it. So I'll say that I'm really impressed with a lot of the universities. I'm talking Lethbridge College, Medicine Hat, MacEwan, U of A, really across the board in Alberta. So it's been really good to see.
There was another question. How
Yep,
do we start? How do we interest data centers to come to the rural areas?
that's great. I would actually start by having a conversation with residents. Um, I'd I'd love to help you if that's something that's on your mind. But really, it comes down to educating residents first. Start there. Host open houses, host education sessions. You're going to get a lot of mixed feedback, and that's exactly what you need. So I would say start there. That's really the starting point of this.
Janet, you had a question.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Colin. Nice to see you.
Hello. Yeah, you too.
Um, I just have a question around productivity. That,
Sure.
Canada often gets painted with a brush that we have low productivity, that we're not competitive with other
Yes.
jurisdictions, maybe let's say OECD countries.
Yeah.
Um, can you just kind of square that for me that with the advent of AI, my gut tells me that productivity may go up, but fewer people will ultimately be employed. Um, how is that a right sense? I might be totally off base here. Just curious about your thoughts in this conversation around revitalization strategies, trying to kind of revive rural communities where it's a shortage of people at the end of the day that is really kind of creating this struggle and the challenges in rural communities.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll I've done my research over the years, and I'll say one thing. What's interesting about the internet, and I'm going to share some research with you after the call, but they said the same thing about the internet. And what did the internet do? Well, it made our lives 1,000 times more efficient and it created new and different jobs. So yes, while it certainly did automate um, and really ultimately replace a lot of different jobs, the internet made it created different jobs. So I would say it's going to be that's what AI is ultimately going to do for our economy. I would also say that due to trades can't necessarily be, I don't want to say automated, but trades you need the manual dexterity of your fingers. You need kind of judgment. You need you need labor in some cases. You can't necessarily automate that. So AI and technology is going to augment that, I believe. I don't think it's necessarily going to replace. So I just think it's going to be a changing economy, whereas the rules of the game are going to be a bit different, and ultimately the workforce and what jobs exist are going to be different, and that's going to lead to a productivity increase. Um, it's going to be a shift. Now, I do love putting or having a crystal ball, but I'll say this: it's going to be a shift. Um, some jobs are certainly going to change. A good example might be like the trucking industry. The trucking industry, there's actually tons of potential. You might see a lot of self-autonomy and long haul drivers, and you might see autonomous drivers, but that's also going to change people's jobs that service the techno the service the trucks. Those folks will just do different jobs now. So yeah, I would say the jobs will change. Productivity should increase over time. Um, we'll certainly see signals in the environment about how this is changing. So I would just say in general, over the next number of years, continue to monitor that, and then we can kind of see how it goes. But yeah, I do see mostly I'll say that the jobs will just change. Okay. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, a couple of questions in the chat here.
Sure.
How do we change the narrative of not in my backyard when it comes to
Yeah,
building clean tech facilities, data centers, IT infrastructure, that
it's
kind
a
of thing?
great question. I would just say it really it comes down to education. Look at the oil and gas industry. Believe it or not, the same thing happened in the oil and gas industry. There was not in my backyard type behavior. And look at what happened. Look at how the industry is today. So I go back to the same point, and it's very simple and basic, but it's like, okay, we need to educate people about the benefits because the benefits are enormous. Tax revenues, diversified tax revenues, I talked about the potential to build better infrastructure, rural population growth. The rural can stay in rural communities. The youth can stay and they can have jobs there. Those are all significant benefits. And it comes down to educating people, right? And it comes down to having a real conversation about it, not a one-way conversation, a two-way conversation. Okay. So I would say those are kind of the main areas I would say to start with. And that's how you change that not in my backyard mentality.
Oscar, you had your hand raised. Do you have any, has your question been answered?
Hello. Oh,
Oh, hi, Oscar. Hi. Go ahead. Do you
hi.
have a question?
Just thanks, Colin, for
Yep,
the
you
great
bet.
presentation. Thanks, Nancy. I think yeah, I think you generally answered my question. My question was more related to do you see any particular pushbacks to some of these uh, economic investments? I know like there's a lot of benefits to it, but like maybe perhaps you talked about like educating people to know the
Yep,
benefits or getting buy-in. Maybe
yep,
there's like particular people are nervous about environmental impacts, or maybe
yep,
there's trouble getting buy-in from maybe indigenous communities, or just
yes,
people want to keep status quo or something like that. So
yep.
just wondering if there's anything specific you've seen.
Yeah, I would say the best approach there would be to have pilots. So I'm suggesting that we're smart and thoughtful and methodical about this. And let's start a pilot. Let's get a pilot going. Let's build some partnerships with the indigenous communities, with landowners, farmers, etc. Let's try this out. I'm not saying we necessarily have a significantly scaled investment, but I do think it's prudent to because we've seen what the opportunity is. We've seen what big tech is spending. That tells you something. Smart money is investing in this for a reason, but it's okay to start small. So I would say we need to start small, start with a pilot, and then ultimately once success is achieved, then it starts to build out from there. Okay. But you need to see that success for people to truly believe it, right? It's great for me to say, oh, this is great, this is beneficial. It's great for me to model it out. I can certainly do that. What's even better is actually living it and actually showing that success. So yeah, I would just say in general would be getting some pilots going in specific communities, and then let's see the benefits come to light, and that should create kind of that flywheel effect.
Great. Thanks so much.
You bet.
There's a question in the chat here.
Sure.
Are there immediate known gaps or challenges that you feel communities should consider addressing? And you talked in your
Yeah.
presentation about broadband and access to broadband.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. What else could there be?
Yeah, I would say that the challenges are real with like things like water and even energy infrastructure. I think these are all real challenges that communities should talk about and address. And I think most importantly is bringing investors and folks to the table that are transparent, that are about the community, because I think that's really important. But I would just say in general, the gaps and challenges would be like, is there enough water? What are the impacts to farming? What are the impacts? What are the possible negative impacts to the community? Does it could it result in negative impacts to our grid? There's a lot of different things to think about. So I would say we need to start that pilot. We need to get some pilot projects going, test and learn, and ultimately from there, there's certainly different approaches we can take. But yeah, I'd say just being in general, I would just say being transparent and ultimately listening to the communities. That would be kind of the most important thing for me.
All right. Gerald's iPhone has his hand
Yeah.
raised.
Yes, he does. Thank you. I'm driving. That's why you're not
Okay.
seeing me. Colin, an excellent presentation. And my question you've started to answer in your last comments. Energy seems to be an issue I hear over and over and over again, and we hear it at a provincial level. How much, like, where could we even start a pilot based on your knowledge of the ability to find enough energy in the grid today in Alberta? Because opens up a whole question, and it even more for policymakers at a provincial and federal level. energy is going to continues to drive our world, yet we seem to be getting mixed messages on that. That's just a whole subject in itself. But is there any place that you can give some direction? Because being located away from power sources, we're at the end of the line. So how does that help us? Because I hear what you're saying, I agree with what you're saying,
Yeah.
but we need a fundamental transformation of
Yes.
energy in this province, even though we're sitting on an
Yes.
abundance, but we have to change it. We have to change the distribution system
Yes.
and transmission system. So there's my rant, if you want to call it that, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this and pick it up another time.
Awesome question, and thank you for that. Here's a general thesis, and I just want to be careful. I don't want to create a political conversation with the folks on the call today. But I'll say this. Okay, there's a significant opportunity because data centers want the lowest cost energy. So there's a significant opportunity for renewable energy to play a pretty big part here. So that's kind of number one. I would say the heartland is another opportunity. Anywhere in Alberta where there is an abundance of opportunity and infrastructure, I would say is important. But I would say solar, wind, etc. I do think that we should be building that out and we should be testing out those models to potentially power data centers. That's what a lot of the data centers are doing in the US. A lot of it's hydro, and then there's some solar and wind kind of mixed in, but a lot of it is renewable energy. So I think we should be really focusing on that. Having said that, I don't want to necessarily create a political conversation because I know folks might have disagreement and opinions, which is totally good. But yeah, I would say probably start there. That to me is a great opportunity, and then wherever there's significant abundance in infrastructure here in Alberta, so perhaps like the Heartland. Okay, does that help, Gerald? You thumbs up if that
I
is a good
think
one
so.
for you.
It does, Colin, but I guess that my challenge is that we coming from an energy-based economy and watching turbines that are not far from our community not turn for days on end.
Yep.
It is a debate. I support renewable energy, but is it the cheapest? That you and I will have to sit down with a pencil and paper because
Yep.
there's that's my concern. That
Yep.
how much do we build to what the capacity is, and like I say, living in energy country, it's so hard because we watch days on end. And, we know the winter, and I guess we'll see what gets proved out. And without government, yeah. I don't want to get into that
No,
debate right now for sure.
totally fine and totally fine. And that's why I also say like the abundance of natural gas, that's ultimately the real opportunity for Alberta. So I do see renewables playing a role as pilot, perhaps, but I do see nat gas and the abundance in Alberta that plays an even larger role because we already have the existing infrastructure and all that can kind of tie into our data centers. So, but yeah, I'd actually love to chat with you offline about that, and we can certainly share emails, trade notes, and
Yeah,
I'll send you some papers as well. Is that okay?
sounds great. I appreciate that, Colin. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.